My mother, Sharon Hart, called me on a Tuesday night, and she sounded broken. She said she missed me so much, and she said the holidays felt empty without me. She cried softly, then asked if I could come home to Charlotte, just for a few days. I lived in Portland and I had a full schedule, but guilt has a way of making time appear. Sharon Hart kept saying family is all we have, and she said she needed her daughter. She also said she would pay for the flight, like it was a gift, like she was making it easy. I hesitated, because I had learned that nothing with Sharon Hart was truly free. Still, I wanted to believe her, and I wanted to believe the call was about love, not convenience. I told her yes, and she immediately brightened, like the tears had done their job. Within an hour, she texted me a confirmation, and my ticket was booked. I tried to ignore the tight feeling in my chest, and I told myself this time would be different. I told myself I would arrive. We would hug, we would cook, we would talk, and I would finally feel like a daughter again. The truth was, I had been paying for my family in quiet ways for years. It started small. A bill here, groceries there, a quick transfer for something urgent. Then it became routine. Rent help for my brother, Tyler Hart, car insurance, credit card payments, and random emergencies that always happened at the worst time. Every time I questioned it, Sharon Hart would cry and say I was abandoning them. So I learned to say yes, and I learned to swallow my doubts. Tyler Hart had 3 kids, and he and Brianna Hart always seemed exhausted, always overwhelmed, always in need of help. Sharon Hart framed it like a crisis, and I framed it like responsibility. When I packed my bag, I added gifts, because that is what good daughters do. I booked time off work, and I told my manager I had a family trip. On the flight, I stared out the window and tried to feel excited. I imagined a warm house, a real holiday, and a mother who actually wanted me there. When I landed in Charlotte, Sharon Hart hugged me quickly, then pulled back and checked her phone. She smiled and said, "You are a lifesaver," and my stomach dropped because I knew that phrase too well. Sharon Hart drove me straight from the airport, talking fast, smiling too wide. She asked about Portland, then barely listened to my answers. When we reached her house in Charlotte, the lights were on and suitcases sat by the door. I thought she was preparing for guests, but then Tyler Hart and Brianna Hart walked in, already dressed like they were headed somewhere nice. Tyler Hart hugged me quickly, then stepped back like he was checking a box. Brianna Hart handed me a folded paper and said it would help me stay organized. I opened it and saw a schedule, morning snacks, lunch, nap time, screen time limits, bath time, bedtime. 3 kids, 5 days, and my name written next to every block. I looked up at Sharon Hart, and she said it was only until they got back. She said Tyler Hart and Brianna Hart needed a break, and she said I was so good with the kids. My chest tightened, because the call was not about missing me, it was about using me. I asked where they were going, and Tyler Hart said a resort nearby, nothing crazy. Sharon Hart added that it was already booked, and they could not cancel. Brianna Hart smiled like I should be happy for them, and she said the kids adore you. I tried to speak, but Sharon Hart cut in, saying you can handle this, you always do. Then she said she would be around, but her purse was already on her shoulder. 10 minutes later, they were gone. Car doors closing, tires crunching gravel, leaving me in the kitchen with 3 children staring up at me. The oldest asked if I was sleeping over, and I said yes, forcing my voice to stay calm. The middle child asked where Mom went, and I said she would be back soon. The youngest started crying, and I scooped him up, rocking gently, while my mind raced. I had taken time off work, I had flown across states, and I had arrived to a job I did not agree to. I walked through the house looking for anything that felt like a welcome, but all I found were instructions. A list of allergies on the fridge, a note about emergency contacts, and a reminder to keep the door locked. Sharon Hart texted me one sentence. "Thank you, sweetheart. You are saving us." I stared at the screen, and my stomach turned. Because saving them had become my role, and they were treating it like a holiday tradition. The first day moved in loops: cereal, cartoons, spilled juice, and sticky hands. I cleaned constantly because kids create mess like breathing. I packed lunches, cut grapes, and negotiated over socks and shoes. By afternoon, the youngest refused to nap, and the middle child melted down over a broken toy. I called Sharon Hart once, asking when they would be back, and she answered with beach noise in the background. She said, "Relax, you are doing great," and she promised they would return in a few days. Then she hung up quickly, like my question was inconvenient. That night, I finally got all 3 kids asleep, and I sat at the kitchen table exhausted and angry. I opened the pantry for tea, and I noticed an envelope on the counter with a printed itinerary. The header had a resort name, and the dates matched the 5 days on the babysitting schedule. My hands went cold. Sharon Hart had told me she flew me home as a gift, but she had also planned a vacation for herself, Tyler Hart, and Brianna Hart. I looked for more paperwork, and I found a credit card receipt tucked under a magnet. The charge was not small, and it was for the resort. The card number was partially hidden, but the last digits looked familiar because I had seen them on my own statements. I told myself I was imagining it, because the alternative was unbearable. Still, I took a photo of the receipt, then another photo of the itinerary. The next morning, I kept the kids busy, then checked Sharon Hart mail pile. I found a bank notice addressed to me, sent to her house, not mine. My name, my account, her address. My throat tightened as I realized what that meant. Sharon Hart was receiving my financial mail. Tyler Hart called that afternoon, cheerful, asking if the kids were behaving. He said the resort was amazing, and he thanked me like I was staff. Brianna Hart added that I deserved a treat, and she suggested I order takeout on their card. I asked which card, and she paused, then said Mom's card. Sharon Hart texted me a heart emoji, then a photo of a pool. I stared at it, feeling rage rise and settle into something sharper: focus. That night, after bedtime, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. I filtered transactions, then I scrolled slowly. Charges I did not recognize, recurring payments I forgot I agreed to, transfers that looked like help but added up like a trap. I realized I was not just babysitting, I was subsidizing their lives, and I finally decided I would stop guessing and start counting. On the 3rd night, the kids finally slept early, and the house went quiet. I sat at the table with my laptop, a notepad, and the photos I took. I started with 1 year, then 2, then 3. Because once you start, you cannot unsee it. I searched my bank history for Tyler Hart name, for Sharon Hart name, for Brianna Hart name. I searched for rent, insurance, utilities, and emergency. I copied each transaction into a spreadsheet: date, amount, category, note. At first, the numbers felt random, like scattered raindrops. Then, the pattern formed, and it looked like a flood. There were monthly payments for Tyler Hart car insurance, and transfers labeled groceries that happened like clockwork. There were credit card payments I did not remember approving. And there were sudden requests that came with tears. Sharon Hart had called them emergencies, but emergencies do not repeat on a schedule. I kept going until my eyes burned. I added up a single year, then stared at the total, shocked. Then I added another year and another. Each total stacked on the last, and the final number made my stomach drop. I had been paying far more than I ever admitted to myself, and I was doing it while being treated like an inconvenience. I thought about the flight, about the tears, about the word lifesaver. It was not gratitude. It was management. When I finished, I saved the file twice and emailed it to myself, because I suddenly did not trust the house around me. I also changed my banking password, then my email password, then my phone passcode. I wrote a list of next steps: freeze credit, pull credit reports, cancel autopay, contact landlords, contact banks. My hands shook, but my mind felt clear. I knew I needed an outside set of eyes, someone who would not soften the truth. So I texted my best friend, Kelsey Nguyen, and I asked if she could look at something for me, because I thought my family had been using me. Kelsey Nguyen replied immediately, and she said, "Yes, send it now." I attached the spreadsheet, and I felt my heart beat slow, because for the first time in years, I was not carrying this alone. Kelsey Nguyen called me early the next morning, and her voice was low and serious. She said, "Madison Hart, I went through your spreadsheet and it is worse than you think." She said, "You are not helping occasionally, you are funding a system." She asked how long this has been happening, and I said about 6 years, maybe more. Kelsey Nguyen paused, then said the pattern is too clean to be accidental. She pointed out repeating payments, the same dates, the same amounts, and the same vague labels. She said those labels are designed to stop questions. She also asked about the resort receipt, and I told her I found it on the counter. Kelsey Nguyen said the charge matches your card cycle, and she said that is not a coincidence. My stomach dropped again, even though I was already angry. Kelsey Nguyen told me to pull my credit report immediately, and she stayed on the phone while I did it. The report loaded slowly, and then my hands started shaking. There was an account I did not open, and it was tied to Sharon Hart address in Charlotte. There were recent charges, and there was an authorized user added, and the name was Sharon Hart. I felt cold, like my blood changed temperature. Kelsey Nguyen said this is identity abuse, and it is not small. She told me to screenshot everything, save every statement, and freeze my credit today. I whispered that she is my mother, like that sentence should protect me. Kelsey Nguyen answered calmly, and she said being your mother is how she got access. She told me to stop thinking in feelings and start thinking in records. Then she asked if I felt safe in that house, with 3 kids and no adults. I looked around the kitchen, at the spilled cereal, the tiny shoes by the door, the quiet hallway. I said I was safe, but I was trapped. Kelsey Nguyen said, "Do not confront Sharon Hart yet, not until you control your accounts." She told me to cancel every automatic payment linked to them, and to do it in writing where possible. She told me to contact your bank fraud department, and to ask for a new account number. She said you can still love your family, and refuse to be exploited. When we hung up, I stared at the wall for a full minute, breathing slowly. Then I opened my laptop again, and I started locking down my life. That afternoon, while the kids watched a movie, I sat at the table and worked fast. I froze my credit, I changed every password, and I added security questions Sharon Hart could not guess. I called my bank, and I asked for the fraud department. I kept my voice steady, even when my throat tightened. I explained that an account was opened without my consent, and that mail was going to an address that was not mine. The representative asked questions, and I answered with facts, not feelings. She flagged the account, started an investigation, and told me a new card would be issued. I asked for a new account number, and she said we can do that too. When the call ended, I felt dizzy, like I had been holding my breath for years. Then I went into my payments list, and I started canceling automatic transfers. Tyler, hot car insurance, removed. Utility payments, removed. Credit card autopay, removed. There were so many, I felt sick. I kept a separate document of what I canceled, with timestamps, because I did not trust anyone to tell the truth later. I also found a lease payment linked to Tyler Hart, and my name was on it as a CO singer. I stared at that line for a long time. Then I wrote down the landlord phone number. Kelsey Nguyen texted me a reminder, document everything, and I texted back, I am doing it now. After dinner, I cleaned the kitchen, then checked the mailbox again. Another envelope arrived, addressed to me at Sharon Hart address, and it was a credit card notice. I took photos, front and back, then placed it back exactly where it was. I wanted Sharon Hart to think her secret was still safe. Later, Tyler Hart called, cheerful, asking for an update like I was an employee. He asked if the kids were asleep, and he said the resort had amazing food. I said the kids were fine, and I kept my tone flat. Tyler Hart said, "You are the best," and he ended the call quickly. I looked at the clock and counted days until they returned. I realized something sharp and clear. Sharon Hart did not fly me home because she missed me. She flew me home because she needed coverage, and she assumed my guilt would keep me quiet. She was wrong. I was still babysitting, but now I was gathering proof and building an exit. On the fourth day, Sharon Hart finally called, and she sounded sweet again. She asked how her grandbabies were, and she said she wished she could be there with me. Then she slipped in the real question, "Everything is okay with money, right?" I almost laughed, because she could feel something shifting. I told her everything was fine, and I asked when they would be home. Sharon Hart said soon, and she told me to be patient, because family deserves rest. I agreed, and I kept my voice calm. After the call, I wrote down the time, the phrasing, and the question about money. Kelsey Nguyen had warned me. People ask that question when they sense a door closing. That night, I updated the spreadsheet with new discoveries, and I added categories for identity accounts and redirected mail. I also added one more column, what I will say when they return. I did not want a screaming match, because Sharon Hart uses emotion like smoke. I wanted a simple presentation, clean numbers, clear dates, undeniable totals. I kept caring for the kids, reading bedtime stories, packing snacks, and wiping tears. They were innocent in this, and I refused to punish them for adult choices. Still, every time I saw their parents on social media, smiling by a pool, my anger tightened. Brianna Hart posted a photo of drinks with umbrellas, and she wrote that she needed this. Sharon Hart commented hearts, and Tyler Hart wrote that family is everything. I saved screenshots, because hypocrisy is also evidence. Late that night, the oldest child asked why I looked sad. I told him I was just tired, and I kissed his forehead. Then I went back to the kitchen and stared at my phone. I had messages ready to send to my landlord, to my bank, and to the fraud investigator. I also had a flight app open, because I was not staying longer than necessary. I realized I was no longer waiting for them to return. I was preparing to leave. And for the first time in years, that thought did not scare me. It steadied me. On the fifth afternoon, I heard a car door slam, then laughter in the driveway. Tyler Hart and Brianna Hart walked in first, tanned and smiling, carrying shopping bags like trophies. Sharon Hart followed behind them, relaxed, wearing a resort bracelet she forgot to remove. They greeted the kids loudly, then looked at me like I was furniture that came with the house. Tyler Hart said, "You are a lifesaver," and Brianna Hart said, "You should come more often." Sharon Hart hugged me quickly, then asked if everything went smoothly. I said the kids were fine. Then I asked a simple question, who paid for the resort? Sharon Hart blinked, then smiled, and said she did. I nodded once, and I asked why the receipt had my card digits. Sharon Hart's face tightened for a second, then she laughed like I was being silly. She said, "You know how bills work, it all evens out." I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I just said I have records. Tyler Hart shifted his weight, suddenly less cheerful. Brianna Hart glanced at Sharon Hart, waiting for her cue. Sharon Hart tried to steer the moment away, saying we should eat, and she said I looked tired. I said, I am tired, and I am also done. The room went quiet, except for a cartoon playing in the background. I told the kids to go wash their hands, then I waited until they ran off. Sharon Hart, said Madison Hart, do not start drama, it was a family emergency week. I said the only emergency was how long you have been using me. Tyler Hart scoffed, saying I chose to help. I said I did choose, because you trained me with guilt. Then I said I stopped choosing yesterday. Sharon Hart tried to cry, but her eyes stayed dry. She said after everything I did for you, this is how you repay me. I said repayment is not what you are asking for. You are asking for control. Brianna Hart said, we are family, and families support each other. I said, support does not mean theft, and it does not mean deception. Sharon Hart opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand calmly. I said, sit down. I am going to show you numbers, and numbers do not care about your feelings. I brought my laptop to the dining table, and I opened the spreadsheet. Sharon Hart sat stiff. Tyler Hart sat with crossed arms, and Brianna Hart hovered like she wanted to flee. I scrolled slowly, not to punish them, but to make it real. I showed the monthly payments for Tyler Hart car insurance, the rent transfers, the utility bills, and the credit card payments. I pointed to the dates, then to the total. Tyler Hart tried to interrupt, saying I was exaggerating, but I kept going. I showed the so-called emergencies, the plumbing crisis that cost a few hundred, then the transfer of $11,000 that never came back. Sharon Hart said she needed that money for repairs, and I asked why there were kitchen renovation charges right after. Sharon Hart stared at the screen like it was rude. Then I pulled up my credit report, and I showed the account I did not open. I showed Sharon Hart name listed as an authorized user. The air changed, because lies are easier when they stay vague. Sharon Hart whispered that she did it to help my credit. Kelsey Nguyen had warned me she would say that. I said, helping does not require hiding mail at your address. Brianna Hart asked if I was serious, and her voice shook. I said I am serious, and I have already spoken to the bank fraud department. Tyler Hart stood up, angry, and said you are going to ruin us. I said you ruined yourself. You just used my name as the cushion. Sharon Hart finally cried, loud and sudden, like a switch. She said she sacrificed everything, and she said I owed her loyalty. I said loyalty is not a blank check, and motherhood is not a license to steal. Then I told them the part that mattered most. I said all automatic payments are canceled, effective immediately. I said I am removing my name from anything tied to Tyler Hart, including the lease. I said the credit account will be closed, and my credit will stay frozen. Tyler Hart looked panicked now, because panic is what happens when money stops. Sharon Hart reached for my hand, and I pulled it back gently. I said you flew me here to babysit, and you expected silence. I said you are not getting silence anymore. Sharon Hart tried one last tactic. She said if I left, the kids would suffer. She said I was selfish, and she said I was breaking the family. Tyler Hart added that Portland changed me, and Brianna Hart said I was being dramatic. I listened. Then I said one sentence. You are adults. You will figure it out. Sharon Hart demanded I turn the payments back on. Just for a month, just until they recover. I said no, because the trap begins with just 1 month. Tyler Hart asked what he was supposed to do about rent, and I told him to pay it, like an adult. Brianna Hart started crying softly, and she said she did not know it was this much. I said you knew enough to take a resort vacation while I worked for free. Sharon Hart snapped that she bought my flight, like the flight erased years of withdrawals. I said I can repay the flight, and I will, because I want no debt between us. That stunned her, because she used debt as a leash. I stood up, and I said I am leaving tonight. Sharon Hart said I could not, because it was late. I said I can because I am done asking permission. I walked to the guest room, packed fast, and kept my hands steady. Sharon Hart followed me, crying harder, saying I was cruel. I did not answer, because arguing feeds her performance. Tyler Hart stood in the hallway, looking like he wanted to threaten me. Then he remembered the evidence. Brianna Hart stayed with the kids, suddenly quiet. I ordered a rideshare, and I kept my phone close, ready to call for help. At the door, Sharon Hart said, "You will regret this." I looked at her and said, "I regret letting this go on." Then I walked out, breathing cold air, feeling fear and freedom at the same time. In the car, I texted Kelsey Nguyen, "I am leaving now." She replied instantly, "Good, do not look back, keep every record." The airport was quiet, and the lights felt harsh after the chaos in Sharon Hart House. I sat near my gate with my bag on my lap, and my phone kept vibrating. Sharon Hart left long voicemails, crying, then yelling, then crying again. Tyler Hart texted that I was selfish and that I ruined everything. Brianna Hart sent a message that sounded softer, saying she did not know and asking me to reconsider. I did not answer any of them. I forwarded every message to a separate email folder because Kelsey Nguyen told me to keep a clean record. When my flight boarded, I walked down the aisle and felt my shoulders drop, like I could finally release something heavy. On the plane, I stared at the seat in front of me and replayed the last 5 days. The schedule, the resort, the receipts, the credit report, and the way Sharon Hart tried to turn theft into love. I thought about the kids, and guilt tried to rise. Then I reminded myself that guilt is the hook they used for years. Tyler Hart and Brianna Hart are their parents, not me. When I landed in Portland after midnight, rain hit my face, cold and steady. It felt like reality returning. I called Kelsey Nguyen from the rideshare, and she asked if I was safe. I said yes, and my voice sounded stronger than I expected. Kelsey Nguyen told me to sleep, then start the next steps in the morning. She said, "The hardest part is leaving, and I already did it." At my apartment, I locked the door twice, then sat on the floor and breathed. My phone buzzed again, and I turned it off. For the first time in years, I could hear my own thoughts. By the next afternoon, the consequences began, because I had shut off the money that held their lives together. Tyler Hart called from an unknown number, shouting that his car insurance was canceled. He said he could not drive to work, and he blamed me. I told him to call his insurance company and set up his own payment. He said he did not have the money, and I said that is not my problem anymore. Sharon Hart sent a message saying she could not pay her credit card, and she accused me of abandoning her. I replied once, short and calm. I said I am working with the bank fraud department, and I will not discuss money directly with you again. Then, I blocked her number. My hands shook after, but the shaking passed. Kelsey Nguyen helped me draft emails to my bank to confirm the fraud claim and to request a new account number. She also told me to pull a full credit report from all bureaus, and I did. There were 2 more small accounts I did not open, both tied to Sharon Hart address. I filed disputes, uploaded documents, and froze everything again. I also called the landlord listed on the lease I found. I explained that my name was on the agreement, but I no longer lived there, and I wanted to be removed. The landlord asked questions, and I answered carefully. He said he would need documentation, and I said I have it. That night, I felt tired, but it was a clean tired, not the old anxious tired. I was doing real work to protect myself. Sharon Hart tried calling my workplace, but my manager told her I was unavailable. Hearing that made me grateful, because boundaries sometimes need allies. I realized my family had never respected my time. Now, my time had guards. Over the next week, Kelsey Nguyen helped me set up a new system, like rebuilding a house after a fire. We created a separate bank account for bills, and another for savings, and we turned on alerts for every transaction. We updated passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and removed any old phone numbers that Sharon Hart might know. Kelsey Nguyen also helped me write a timeline when the payments started, when the fraud account opened, and when the resort charges appeared. She said timelines win cases because they show intent. I asked if I should press charges, and she said that decision is yours. But the fraud report already exists. She said you can choose accountability without revenge, but you cannot choose peace without protection. I listened, because she spoke like someone who has seen this before. Meanwhile, Sharon Hart tried recruiting relatives to call me, saying I was cruel. A cousin left a voicemail, saying, "Family helps family." I replied politely, "That theft is not help, and I was handling it with the bank." Then I blocked the cousin too. It hurt, but it hurt less than being used. Tyler Hart sent one message that sounded different. Not angry, just scared. He said he might be evicted. I read it twice, and I felt that old pull to rescue him. Then I opened my spreadsheet, and I looked at the total again. The number reminded me that rescuing him was not love, it was enabling. I did not reply. Instead, I wrote a note to myself. You are allowed to stop. That night, I slept 8 hours, and I woke up without dread. The silence in my apartment felt like a new kind of wealth. A week after I returned to Portland, Sharon Hart showed up at my apartment building. I did not open the door because I saw her on the lobby camera first. She stood there with a bag in one hand and a dramatic look on her face, like she expected a reunion scene. I texted the front desk and told them not to let her up. Sharon Hart started calling from different numbers, leaving messages that shifted every hour. One message was tears, saying she missed Madison Hart, and she did not know what went wrong. The next message was anger, saying I owed her everything, and I was ungrateful. Then she tried fear, saying Tyler Hart might lose the apartment, and the kids would blame me. I listened to one voicemail, then saved it, then stopped listening. Kelsey Nguyen reminded me that repeated contact after a boundary is evidence. I kept every message, and I did not respond. That night, Sharon Hart sent a final text saying she would tell everyone I abandoned the family. I stared at it, then I wrote one sentence back, only once. I said any further contact must go through my bank fraud investigator or my attorney if I hire one. Then I blocked that number too. My hands shook for a minute, then steadied, because fear fades when you stop feeding it. The bank investigation moved faster than I expected because the documentation was clean. Fraud is easier to prove when there is a trail, and Sharon Hart left a trail. A representative called and confirmed the account opened in my name was unauthorized. She said the authorized user addition, Sharon Hart, was part of the file. The bank reversed a portion of the charges, and they issued a credit while they continued reviewing older activity. When I saw the first refund, my throat tightened because it felt like a piece of my life returning. It was not a huge amount compared to the total, but it was proof that I was not crazy. Kelsey Nguyen celebrated quietly, then told me to stay focused because partial refunds can make people relax too early. She helped me send follow-up requests for statements, and she helped me draft a letter to the credit bureaus. Each day, I received another email, another confirmation, another step forward. Sharon Hart called my workplace again, but this time my manager told her to stop contacting the office. Hearing that made me feel protected. Tyler Hart sent a message saying the landlord was angry and he did not know what to do. I did not reply because I was not the solution anymore. The more money I recovered, the more I understood something simple. I had been kept in confusion on purpose, because confusion keeps you paying. Kelsey Nguyen suggested I speak to an attorney, not to start a war, but to understand options. I scheduled a consultation, and I brought my timeline, my spreadsheet, my credit report screenshots, and my saved voicemails. The attorney listened, asked clear questions, and then said what I needed to hear. He said this is not a family misunderstanding. This is financial exploitation and identity fraud. He said you can pursue civil recovery, and you can also cooperate with criminal investigation if the bank escalates it. He said the choice depends on what safety looks like for you. I asked if I could remove my name from Tyler Hartley's. He said yes, and he told me the steps: written notice, documentation, and follow-up. He also suggested a cease and desist letter if Sharon Hart continued harassment. I left the office feeling both heavy and relieved. Heavy, because it was real. Relieved, because I was not trapped. That evening I walked home through light rain, and I realized I had not felt this calm in years. I had money in my account that I earned, and it stayed there. I had time after work, and it stayed mine. I had silence, and the silence did not feel lonely. It felt safe. I opened my laptop, updated my spreadsheet, and wrote the next steps. Then I made dinner, and I ate slowly, without guilt. For the first time, I was not funding someone else's life. I was building my own. The first real test came on a Friday afternoon, when Tyler Hart called from a blocked number, and his voice sounded different. He was not yelling, he was scared. And he said the landlord posted an eviction notice. He said Brianna Hart was crying, and the kids were asking questions, and Sharon Hart was blaming Madison Hart. For a second, the old instinct rushed in, the urge to fix it, to transfer money, to make the noise stop. Then I looked at my spreadsheet again, and I felt that instinct break. I told Tyler Hart I was sorry he was stressed, and I said I would not pay his rent. He started bargaining immediately, asking for a small loan, just for 1 month, just until he caught up. I said no, because 1 month was how the trap always restarted. He accused me of turning cold, and I reminded him that I had been warm for 6 years. I asked why he could afford a resort, but not his own bills, and he went silent. He said, Sharon Hart promised everything would work out, and I said that promise was built on my bank account. Tyler Hart told me I was punishing the kids, and I said I was refusing to be exploited. I told him he could call social services for support. He could talk to the landlord. He could set up a payment plan, but he could not use me as a safety net anymore. He hung up hard, and my hands shook for a minute. Then the shaking passed, and I felt something new, steadiness. That night I took a walk in Portland, breathing cold air, letting guilt rise and fall without obeying it. I texted Kelsey Nguyen, and I told her what happened. She replied that boundaries feel cruel to people who benefit from you. She said, "You did not break the family. You broke the pattern." I returned home, locked the door, and checked my accounts. My money was still there, and for the first time, that felt normal. 2 days later, Sharon Hart sent an email from a new address because her phone numbers were blocked. The subject line said, "Please do not do this," and the body was a long performance. She wrote that she was sick with stress. She wrote that she could not sleep. She wrote that Madison Hart was tearing the family apart. She said she flew me home because she loved me, and she said the resort was a small break they deserved. She claimed the credit card account was a misunderstanding, and she said she only used it to build my credit. She ended with a sentence that made my stomach turn. "A good daughter would fix this." I forwarded the email to my fraud folder. Then I did not reply. Later that day, she showed up again at my building, and I watched her through the lobby camera. She held a gift bag, and she looked around like she wanted an audience. When nobody let her in, she sat on a bench and started crying loudly. A passerby asked if she needed help, and she pointed at the building like I was holding her hostage. I called the front desk and asked them to document the incident. Then I called non-emergency support, and I reported unwanted contact. Sharon Hart left before officers arrived, but the message was clear. She wanted pressure, not peace. That night, Kelsey Nguyen reviewed the new email and said Sharon Hart was escalating because her access was gone. She told me to keep doing what I was doing. Document. Do not engage, protect the door. I sat at my kitchen table and wrote a short statement for myself, so I would not forget. Love does not require secrecy, and care does not require theft. I read it out loud twice. Then I closed my laptop. Outside, Portland rain tapped the window, steady and quiet. I realized Sharon Hart hated quiet, because quiet meant she could not control the room. The call from Brianna Hart came the next week, and her voice was soft and careful. She said, "Madison Hart, I am not calling to fight. I am calling to understand." She said Sharon Hart told her I was having a breakdown and that I was being influenced by a friend. I heard the script and I felt anger rise, then settle. I told Brianna Hart I was not breaking down. I was finally seeing clearly. I said I documented 6 years of payments, and I proved an unauthorized account in my name. Brianna Hart went quiet, then whispered that she did not know about the credit account. She said Tyler Hart handled money, and Sharon Hart always said it was temporary help. I asked Brianna Hart one question. "Why did you leave your kids with me for 5 days without asking?" She sighed, and she said Sharon Hart promised I would be happy to do it. She admitted they wanted the resort break, and they assumed I would understand. I told her understanding is not consent, and family is not permission. Brianna Hart started crying, and she said she was tired, and she felt trapped too. For a moment I almost softened. Then I remembered what softness cost me. I told her I cared about the kids, and I hoped she kept them safe. I also told her I would not be paying any bills, and I would not be babysitting as payment for love. I said if she wanted a relationship, it had to start with truth and with respect. Brianna Hart asked if I would send her the spreadsheet, and I paused. Then I said yes, because reality might be the only thing that wakes them up. I emailed a redacted version, showing totals and categories, and I removed sensitive account numbers. Brianna Hart replied with one line. I did not realize it was that much. I stared at the message, feeling both sad and relieved. Sad because they really did not see me as a person. Relieved because the numbers were now outside my head, where nobody could deny them. After Brianna Hart saw the numbers, the family dynamic shifted because denial became harder. Tyler Hart called again, not to apologize, but to argue. He said I was exaggerating, and he said I counted things unfairly. I asked him which payments were not real, and he could not name one. He said I should not have kept records, as if documentation was betrayal. I told him the betrayal was taking money and calling it love. Tyler Hart, said Sharon. Hart was the one who handled it, and he tried to place blame upward. I said you still benefited, and you still went to the resort while I worked. He got quiet, then said he did not think it was that serious. I said it was serious enough to open accounts in my name, and to route my mail to Charlotte. That line changed his tone. He asked if I was going to press charges. I said the bank is already investigating, and I am protecting myself. I did not threaten him. I did not promise anything. I simply told the truth. And truth is scary when you have been living on someone else's money. That week, a relative reached out, asking why Sharon Hart was crying on social media. Sharon Hart posted vague messages about betrayal and ungrateful children. I responded once, privately, telling the relative I was handling identity fraud with my bank. The relative stopped messaging after that, because most people do not want to get near real consequences. Sharon Hart kept trying to paint herself as the victim, but her performance had less power now that records existed. Kelsey Nguyen said, "This is the stage where manipulators scramble because the story is slipping. Slipping. She told me to stay calm, keep documenting, and do not chase closure. Closure is not a conversation, it is a boundary that holds. I kept going to work, kept cooking dinner, kept sleeping 8 hours. Each normal day was proof that I was no longer trapped. 2 weeks later, I received a formal letter from the bank confirming unauthorized activity and account misuse. They reversed more charges, and they issued a new account number. Seeing it in writing made my throat tighten because it was official. I forwarded the letter to Kelsey Nguyen, and she replied that this is what protection looks like. The fraud investigator also asked if I wanted to file a police report to support the case. I took a long breath because the word police report felt heavy. Then I thought about Sharon Hart opening accounts in my name and moving money behind my back. I thought about the resort and the schedule and the way she called me a lifesaver while draining me. I said yes. I filed the report online, attached documents, and kept my statement simple: facts, dates, and totals. I did not add emotion, because emotion is easy to dismiss. Facts are not. After I filed it, I felt both sick and relieved. Sick, because it was my mother. Relieved, because consequences are sometimes the only language people understand. Sharon Hart sent another email that night saying I was destroying her life. I did not answer. I saved it, and I went to bed. In the morning, my account balance was mine, and it stayed mine. That steadiness mattered more than her outrage. The last time I heard Sharon Hart voice directly, it was through a voicemail she left from a private number. She sounded tired, and she tried to sound gentle. She said, "Madison Hart, come home. We can talk, we can fix it like family." Then her tone shifted, and she said if I did not stop, she would make sure everyone knew I abandoned the kids. She ended with a sob, like she wanted the last sound to be her pain. I listened once, then I deleted it from my phone because I had already saved it elsewhere. I was done letting her live in my pocket. I wrote one final email, short and clean. I said I will not discuss money with you directly. I will not meet in private, and I will not reverse the actions I took to protect myself. I said any communication must go through the fraud investigator or legal counsel. I did not insult her. I did not explain my feelings because explanations are openings. Then I blocked the email address. After that, something quiet happened. My body started to relax. My shoulders lowered, my jaw unclenched, and my mind stopped scanning for the next crisis. I realized I had been living inside constant emergency for 6 years, and it was not real emergency. It was a system designed to keep me paying. Now the system was broken. I could finally be a person again, not a resource. I made dinner, turned on music, and cleaned my kitchen slowly. It felt ordinary, and ordinary felt like a miracle. A month later, my life in Portland felt steady in a way I had never allowed myself to expect. My paycheck stayed in my account, my rent was paid on time, and no emergency text arrived to steal my sleep. Kelsey Nguyen helped me review everything one last time. Then she told me to stop living like the next crisis was guaranteed. I started therapy, not because I was broken, but because I was trained. I learned how guilt can be installed like software, and how fear can feel like love when you grow up inside it. Brianna Hart sent one more message, quieter than the others, saying she was trying to fix things on her side. She said Tyler Hart was looking for a second job, and they were talking to the landlord, and she admitted they were ashamed. I replied with one sentence: I hope you keep the kids safe, and I hope you build your own stability. I did not offer money, and I did not offer rescue, because rescue was the old chain. Tyler Hart never apologized in a clean way, but his anger stopped calling me, and that silence was a form of acceptance. Sharon Hart kept posting vague quotes about betrayal, but fewer people reacted, because drama loses power when the source is obvious. The bank process continued, and the fraud file moved forward without my emotions involved. I did not celebrate her consequences. I simply accepted them, because consequences were overdue. One evening, I walked along a wet sidewalk, and I realized how different my body felt. My shoulders were not tight, my stomach was not knotted, and my mind was not doing math in the background. I had more time, more money, and more breath. But the best part was simpler. I had choice. I could say yes because I wanted to, not because I was afraid. I could say no without writing a speech in my head first. I thought about the 5 days in Charlotte, and how I arrived hoping for love, and left with proof. That trip did not give me a family, but it gave me clarity. Sharon Hart flew me home to keep the system running. I flew myself back to end it. If you are listening, and you feel like your family only calls when they need something, please hear this. Love does not require you to go broke, and loyalty does not require you to be silent. You can care about people and still refuse to be used. I am Madison Hart, and the moment I stopped paying for their comfort, I started building my own peace.